The morning sun painted the small town of Millbrook in golden hues as 12-year-old twins Emma and Sarah Martinez walked their family's German Shepherd, Rex, along the winding forest trail behind their house. It was a Saturday ritual they had followed for 3 years. Ever since their parents decided the energetic dog needed more exercise than their small backyard could provide. Emma, the more adventurous of the two, always led the way with Rex's leash in her hand, while Sarah followed closely behind, her notebook ready to sketch any interesting birds or flowers they might encounter. The girls were identical in appearance but completely different in personality. Emma lived for adventure and excitement, while Sarah preferred quiet observation and artistic pursuits. Rex suddenly stopped mid-stride, his ears perked up and his body tense. The massive dog began whining, a sound the girls had never heard from him before. He pulled against the leash, trying to veer off the main trail toward a dense cluster of oak trees. "What's wrong with him today?" Emma asked, struggling to keep Rex from dragging her into the underbrush. Sarah looked up from her notebook, noticing how the dog's tail was tucked between his legs. "Maybe he smells something. You know how he gets around other animals." But this was different. Rex wasn't displaying his usual excitement when he caught the scent of a rabbit or squirrel. His behavior seemed urgent, almost desperate. He barked once, a sharp sound that echoed through the quiet forest, then looked back at the girls as if trying to communicate something important. The twins exchanged glances. They had grown up with Rex since he was a puppy, and they could read his moods better than anyone. Something was definitely wrong. "Should we follow him?" Emma asked, already knowing what her sister's answer would be. Sarah hesitated for a moment, looking deeper into the forest where Rex wanted to go. The area was unfamiliar to them, and their parents had always warned them to stay on the marked trails. But Rex's behavior was so unusual that her curiosity overcame her caution. "Okay, but just for a few minutes," Sarah agreed, closing her notebook and stuffing it into her backpack. Emma released her grip on the leash slightly, allowing Rex to guide them through the trees. The dog moved with purpose, occasionally looking back to make sure the girls were following. Branches caught at their clothes as they pushed through the undergrowth, and Sarah began to worry they were getting too far from the main trail. After about 10 minutes of walking, Rex suddenly stopped again. This time, his whining became more intense, and he began pawing at the ground near a large fallen log. The girls caught up to him, breathing heavily from their trek through the dense forest. "What is it, boy?" Emma asked, kneeling down beside the agitated dog. That's when they saw it. Partially hidden behind the fallen log was a man in what appeared to be a sheriff's uniform. He was lying on his side, motionless, with his hat several feet away. His radio was crackling with static, and his patrol car was nowhere to be seen. Sarah gasped, instinctively stepping back. Is he dead?" Emma moved closer, her heart pounding. The man's face was pale, but she could see his chest rising and falling slightly. "No, he's breathing, but barely." Rex sat down beside the unconscious sheriff, his whining becoming softer but more constant. It was as if the dog understood the gravity of the situation and was keeping vigil over the injured man. The girls had never encountered anything like this before. They were alone in the forest with what appeared to be a seriously injured police officer, and they had no idea how long he had been lying there or what had happened to him. "We need to get help," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. Emma nodded, but as she reached for her phone, she realized they were too deep in the forest to get a signal. The screen showed no bars, and their location was too remote for any cell tower to reach. "My phone's not working," Emma said, panic creeping into her voice. Sarah checked her phone as well, with the same result. They were truly alone with the injured sheriff, and Rex seemed to be the only one who had known where to find him. The twins looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. How had Rex known the man was here? And more importantly, what were they going to do now? The sheriff stirred slightly, making a weak groaning sound, but his eyes remained closed. Rex immediately moved closer to him, gently nuzzling the man's hand with his nose. Time was running out, and the girls knew they had to make a decision quickly. The sheriff needed medical attention, and they were the only ones who could help him get it. Emma knelt down beside the sheriff and gently shook his shoulder. "Sir, can you hear me?" she called out, her voice echoing in the quiet forest. The man's eyelids fluttered slightly, and he made another weak, groaning sound. His lips moved as if he was trying to speak, but no words came out. Sarah noticed that his uniform was torn in several places. and there were scratches on his hands and face, as if he had fallen or been dragged through the underbrush. "Look at his leg," Sarah whispered, pointing to the sheriff's left ankle, which was bent at an odd angle beneath him. Emma carefully moved closer to examine the injury. Even without medical training, she could tell the ankle was badly twisted, possibly broken. The sheriff's breathing was shallow and labored, and beads of sweat covered his forehead despite the cool morning air. Rex remained close to the injured man, his ears alert and his eyes constantly scanning the surrounding forest. The dog's protective instincts had kicked in, and he seemed determined to guard the sheriff until help arrived. "We have to go get help," Emma said, standing up and brushing dirt off her knees. "One of us needs to run back to town." Sarah looked around at the dense forest surrounding them. "But how will we find this place again? We don't even know exactly where we are." It was true. In their rush to follow Rex, they had twisted and turned through the trees without paying attention to landmarks or direction. The forest all looked the same, and the fallen log where the sheriff lay was hidden from view of any main trails. Emma thought for a moment, then began gathering small stones from the ground. "We'll make a trail," she said. "Like in the fairy tales. We'll mark our path so we can lead the paramedics back here." Sarah nodded, understanding immediately. "Good idea. But who's going and who's staying?" Both girls looked down at the sheriff, then at Rex, who had positioned himself like a guardian beside the injured man. The dog showed no signs of wanting to leave, and his presence seemed to be providing some comfort to the unconscious officer. "I'll go," Emma decided. "I'm faster and you're better at staying calm in emergencies." Sarah felt a flutter of fear at the thought of being left alone in the forest with an injured stranger, but she knew Emma was right. Sarah had always been the more level-headed twin, better at handling stressful situations without panicking. "Okay, but be careful," Sarah said. "And hurry." Emma began placing stones every few yards as she retraced their steps through the forest. Rex watched her go but made no move to follow, remaining steadfast beside the sheriff. Sarah sat down on a nearby rock, keeping a close eye on both the dog and the injured man. The forest seemed much quieter now that Emma had left. Sarah could hear every small sound, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant call of a bird, and the sheriff's labored breathing. She pulled out her notebook and began sketching the area around them, thinking it might help the rescue workers understand the location better. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the sheriff's eyes opened slightly. He looked confused and disoriented, his gaze moving slowly around the forest before settling on Sarah. "Where?" He tried to speak, but his voice was barely a whisper. "It's okay," Sarah said softly, moving closer but being careful not to startle him. "You're hurt, but my sister went to get help. We found you here in the forest." The sheriff's eyes moved to Rex, who was still sitting faithfully beside him. A small smile crossed the man's pale face. "Good dog," he whispered. Rex's tail wagged slightly at the praise, but he didn't move from his position. "What happened to you?" Sarah asked gently. The sheriff closed his eyes for a moment as if trying to remember. "Chasing someone," he managed to say. "Fell. Twisted my ankle. Radio. Dead battery." Sarah looked at the radio clipped to his belt. The red light that should have indicated power was dark. The sheriff had been lying here with no way to call for help, and without Rex leading them to this spot, he might never have been found. "How long have you been here?" Sarah asked. "Since yesterday evening," the sheriff replied weakly. Sarah's eyes widened. The man had been lying injured in the forest for almost 15 hours. No wonder he looked so pale and weak. He probably hadn't had any water or food, and the night temperature had dropped considerably. Rex seemed to understand that the sheriff was awake now. The dog moved closer and gently licked the man's hand, as if offering comfort and reassurance. "What's your name?" Sarah asked, trying to keep the sheriff conscious and talking. "Sheriff? Tom Bradley," he replied, his voice getting slightly stronger. "Been on the force. 23 years. Never had anything like this happen before." Sarah continued talking to Sheriff Bradley, asking him about his family and his work, anything to keep him awake and alert. She could tell he was fighting to stay conscious, and she worried about what would happen if he passed out again before help arrived. Emma knelt down beside the sheriff and gently shook his shoulder. "Sir, can you hear me?" she called out, her voice echoing in the quiet forest. The man's eyelids fluttered slightly, and he made another weak, groaning sound. His lips moved as if he was trying to speak, but no words came out. Sarah noticed that his uniform was torn in several places, and there were scratches on his hands and face, as if he had fallen or been dragged through the underbrush. "Look at his leg," Sarah whispered, pointing to the sheriff's left ankle, which was bent at an odd angle beneath him. Emma carefully moved closer to examine the injury. Even without medical training, she could tell the ankle was badly twisted, possibly broken. The sheriff's breathing was shallow and labored, and beads of sweat covered his forehead despite the cool morning air. Rex remained close to the injured man, his ears alert and his eyes constantly scanning the surrounding forest. The dog's protective instincts had kicked in, and he seemed determined to guard the sheriff until help arrived. "We have to go get help," Emma said, standing up and brushing dirt off her knees. "One of us needs to run back to town." Sarah looked around at the dense forest surrounding them. "But how will we find this place again? We don't even know exactly where we are." It was true. In their rush to follow Rex, they had twisted and turned through the trees without paying attention to landmarks or direction. The forest all looked the same, and the fallen log where the sheriff lay was hidden from view of any main trails. Emma thought for a moment, then began gathering small stones from the ground. "We'll make a trail," she said. "Like in the fairy tales. We'll mark our path so we can lead the paramedics back here." Sarah nodded, understanding immediately. "Good idea. But who's going and who's staying?" Both girls looked down at the sheriff, then at Rex, who had positioned himself like a guardian beside the injured man. The dog showed no signs of wanting to leave, and his presence seemed to be providing some comfort to the unconscious officer. "I'll go," Emma decided. "I'm faster and you're better at staying calm in emergencies." Sarah felt a flutter of fear at the thought of being left alone in the forest with an injured stranger, but she knew Emma was right. Sarah had always been the more level-headed twin, better at handling stressful situations without panicking. "Okay, but be careful," Sarah said. "And hurry." Emma began placing stones every few yards as she retraced their steps through the forest. Rex watched her go but made no move to follow, remaining steadfast beside the sheriff. Sarah sat down on a nearby rock, keeping a close eye on both the dog and the injured man. The forest seemed much quieter now that Emma had left. Sarah could hear every small sound, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant call of a bird, and the sheriff's labored breathing. She pulled out her notebook and began sketching the area around them, thinking it might help the rescue workers understand the location better. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the sheriff's eyes opened slightly. He looked confused and disoriented, his gaze moving slowly around the forest before settling on Sarah. "Where?" He tried to speak, but his voice was barely a whisper. "It's okay," Sarah said softly, moving closer but being careful not to startle him. "You're hurt, but my sister went to get help. We found you here in the forest." The sheriff's eyes moved to Rex, who was still sitting faithfully beside him. A small smile crossed the man's pale face. "Good dog," he whispered. Rex's tail wagged slightly at the praise, but he didn't move from his position. "What happened to you?" Sarah asked gently. The sheriff closed his eyes for a moment as if trying to remember. "Chasing someone," he managed to say. "Fell. Twisted my ankle. Radio. Dead battery." Sarah looked at the radio clipped to his belt. The red light that should have indicated power was dark. The sheriff had been lying here with no way to call for help, and without Rex leading them to this spot, he might never have been found. "How long have you been here?" Sarah asked. "Since yesterday evening," the sheriff replied weakly. Sarah's eyes widened. The man had been lying injured in the forest for almost 15 hours. No wonder he looked so pale and weak. He probably hadn't had any water or food, and the night temperature had dropped considerably. Rex seemed to understand that the sheriff was awake now. The dog moved closer and gently licked the man's hand, as if offering comfort and reassurance. "What's your name?" Sarah asked, trying to keep the sheriff conscious and talking. "Sheriff? Tom Bradley," he replied, his voice getting slightly stronger. "Been on the force. 23 years. Never had anything like this happen before." Sarah continued talking to Sheriff Bradley, asking him about his family and his work, anything to keep him awake and alert. She could tell he was fighting to stay conscious, and she worried about what would happen if he passed out again before help arrived. News of the rescue spread through Millbrook like wildfire. By the time Emma, Sarah, and Rex made it back to their house, Their parents were waiting anxiously on the front porch. Having heard about the incident from neighbors who had seen the emergency vehicles racing through town, Maria Martinez gathered both her daughters into a tight hug, tears streaming down her face. When Mrs. Peterson called and said you girls were involved in some kind of emergency, I thought something terrible had happened to you. Carlos Martinez knelt down to pet Rex, who was still excited from the morning's adventure. "This dog of ours is something special," he said, scratching behind Rex's ears. How did he know that man was out there? Emma and Sarah took turns telling their parents the whole story, from Rex's unusual behavior on the trail to finding Sheriff Bradley and coordinating the rescue. Their parents listened in amazement, pride evident on their faces. "You girls showed incredible courage and quick thinking," their father said. "But promise me you'll never go off the marked trails again without telling us first." Both girls nodded solemnly. The morning's events had shown them how quickly things could become dangerous, even in their familiar forest. Later that afternoon, their phone began ringing constantly. First, it was the local newspaper wanting to interview the family about the rescue. Then came calls from people in town who had heard the story and wanted to express their gratitude. Sheriff Bradley was well liked in the community, and everyone was relieved to hear he had been found safe. The most surprising call came from the local television news station in the county seat, 30 miles away. They wanted to send a reporter to interview the twins and Rex about their heroic rescue. "We don't need to be on TV," Sarah said quietly to her parents. "We just did what anyone would have done." But their parents encouraged them to share their story. "Sometimes it's important to let people know about good things that happen," their mother explained. "It gives others hope and shows them that ordinary people can do extraordinary things." The next morning, a news van pulled up outside the Martinez house. The reporter, a cheerful woman named Jessica Chen, set up her camera equipment in the family's backyard while Rex played nearby. "Tell me about yesterday morning," Jessica said, pointing her microphone toward the twins. "What made Rex behave so strangely?" Emma and Sarah took turns describing the events, with Rex sitting calmly between them as if he understood he was part of the story. The dog seemed to enjoy the attention, his tail wagging whenever the camera focused on him. "The doctors at the hospital say Sheriff Bradley is going to make a full recovery," Jessica told them. "His ankle will need surgery, but he'll be back on duty in a few months. He specifically asked me to thank you girls and Rex again." After the interview, the reporter asked if she could film Rex demonstrating his tracking abilities. Carlos Martinez hid behind a tree in their backyard, and Rex easily found him within minutes, his nose leading him directly to the hiding spot. "Amazing," Jessica said, zooming in on Rex's focused expression. "This dog clearly has exceptional instincts." The story aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news, and the Martinez family gathered around their television to watch. Seeing themselves on TV was surreal for the twins, but they were most excited to see Rex featured prominently in the report. Local hero dog Rex and his 12-year-old owners, Emma and Sarah Martinez, saved the life of beloved Sheriff Tom Bradley. Jessica's voice narrated over footage of Rex playing in the yard. Without Rex's incredible instincts and the girls' quick thinking, this story could have had a very different ending. The phone started ringing again as soon as the news segment ended. This time, the calls were from people outside Millbrook who had seen the story. Some were other dog owners sharing their own stories of their pets' amazing abilities. Others were simply calling to congratulate the family. One particularly special call came from a veterinarian in the next county. "I've been practicing for 30 years, Dr. Williams said, and I've seen dogs do incredible things, but Rex's behavior is truly remarkable. Dogs have senses we don't fully understand, and Rex clearly knew something was wrong long before you girls could have detected anything." That evening, as the family sat together on their porch, Rex lying contentedly at their feet, Emma asked her father a question that had been bothering her all day. "Dad, how do you think Rex knew Sheriff Bradley was out there? We were so far from where we found him." Carlos Martinez thought for a moment, looking down at their faithful German shepherd. "Dogs can smell things from incredibly far distances," he said. "Maybe Rex caught the sheriff's scent on the wind, or maybe he heard something we couldn't hear. Dogs' hearing is much better than ours." Sarah had a different theory. "I think Rex just knew someone needed help. Some dogs are like that. They can sense when people are in trouble, even when there's no logical way they should know." Their mother nodded in agreement. "Whatever it was, we should be grateful we have such a special dog. And I'm proud of both of you for being brave enough to follow him, and smart enough to get help. As the sun set over Millbrook, the Martinez family reflected on how one morning walk had changed their lives forever. They had always known Rex was a good dog, but now they understood he was something truly extraordinary. 2 weeks after the rescue, Sheriff Bradley was released from the hospital. His ankle was in a cast and he walked with crutches, but his spirits were high. The first place he wanted to visit was the Martinez family home. Emma and Sarah were doing homework at the kitchen table when they heard a car pull into their driveway. Rex, who had been napping by the window, suddenly lifted his head and began wagging his tail excitedly. "Someone's here," Emma said, looking out the window. "It's a police car." The twins ran outside, followed by their parents, to find Sheriff Bradley slowly making his way up their front walkway on his crutches. Rex bounded over to him, careful not to jump up, and gently nuzzled the sheriff's free hand. "Hello, old friend," Sheriff Bradley said warmly, scratching Rex behind the ears. "I owe you my life." The family invited the sheriff inside, where he settled into their living room armchair with obvious relief. Walking was still difficult for him, but he had insisted on making this visit personally. "I wanted to thank you all properly," he said, looking around at the family gathered in the living room. "The doctors told me that if I had stayed in that forest much longer, I could have gone into shock from the cold and dehydration. You three saved my life." Sheriff Bradley reached into a bag he had brought with him and pulled out several items. For Emma and Sarah, he had certificates declaring them honorary deputies of the Millbrook Police Department, complete with their names written in elegant calligraphy. "These are official," he explained. "You're both now honorary members of our force, and you'll always be welcome at the station." The girls beamed with pride as they examined their certificates. But it was what Sheriff Bradley had brought for Rex that truly amazed the family. "This," he said, lifting a beautiful leather collar from his bag, "is a special collar made by the same company that makes equipment for police dogs. It has Rex's name on it, and it identifies him as an official search and rescue honor dog for the Millbrook Police Department." The collar was made of rich brown leather with brass fittings. Engraved on a brass nameplate were the words, "Rex Martinez, Search and Rescue Honor Dog, Millbrook PD." Carlos Martinez carefully fastened the new collar around Rex's neck. The dog seemed to understand the significance of the moment, sitting still and proud as the collar was adjusted. "There's something else," Sheriff Bradley continued. "The town council met yesterday, and they've decided to give Rex a special award at next month's town meeting. He's going to receive the key to the city." Sarah gasped. "Really? Rex is getting the key to the city?" "He deserves it," Sheriff Bradley said firmly. "What he did was extraordinary. In all my years of police work, I've never seen anything quite like it." The sheriff went on to explain what had happened the day he got lost in the forest. He had been tracking a suspected burglar who had been breaking into homes on the outskirts of town. The suspect had fled into the forest, and Sheriff Bradley had followed. But in the thick undergrowth, he had stepped in a hidden hole and twisted his ankle severely. "I tried to call for backup, but my radio battery died," he explained. "I thought I could make it back to my patrol car, but the pain was too intense and I kept getting turned around in the trees. By nightfall, I realized I was lost." The sheriff had spent a terrifying night in the forest, growing weaker by the hour. "I honestly thought I might not make it out," he admitted. "But then I heard Rex barking in the distance and I knew help was coming." As Sheriff Bradley shared his story, Rex lay quietly at his feet, as if listening to every word. The dog's behavior over the past 2 weeks had been noticeably different, the family had observed. He seemed more confident, more alert, as if he understood the important role he had played. "Has Rex always been this good at finding things?" Sheriff Bradley asked. Maria Martinez nodded. "Ever since he was a puppy, he's had this ability to locate lost items around the house. If one of the girls misplaced a toy or if Carlos lost his keys, Rex would always lead us right to them. And he's incredibly protective of the family," Carlos added. "He always seems to know when something's wrong before the rest of us do." Sheriff Bradley studied Rex thoughtfully. "Have you ever considered having him professionally trained as a search and rescue dog? With natural abilities like his, he could help save other lives." The family exchanged glances. The idea had never occurred to them, but now that Sheriff Bradley mentioned it, it seemed like a natural fit for Rex's talents. "Would that mean he'd have to leave us?" Emma asked, concern evident in her voice. "Not at all," Sheriff Bradley assured her. "Search and rescue dogs usually live with their families. They just receive special training so they can assist in emergencies when needed." Rex would still be your family pet, but he'd also be ready to help if someone else ever gets lost or injured. Sarah looked down at Rex, who was now wearing his official collar with pride. What do you think, boy? Would you like to help save more people? Rex tilted his head and wagged his tail, almost as if he understood the question and was answering yes. 3 weeks later, the entire town of Millbrook gathered in the community center for the monthly town meeting. Word had spread far beyond the town limits about Rex and the Martinez family, and the small building was packed with people who had come to witness the special ceremony. Emma and Sarah sat in the front row with their parents, while Rex lay calmly at their feet, wearing his official search and rescue honor dog collar. The twins had dressed in their best clothes for the occasion, and their parents beamed with pride. Mayor Patricia Williamson stood at the podium, looking out at the crowded room. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight for a very special reason. 3 weeks ago, our community experienced something remarkable that reminded us all of the power of courage, quick thinking, and the incredible bond between humans and animals. The mayor began recounting the story of the rescue, though most people in the room had already heard it multiple times. As she spoke, Emma noticed that Sheriff Bradley had entered the room, still using crutches but looking much stronger than he had during his visit to their house. I'd like to invite Sheriff Tom Bradley to come forward and share his perspective on that incredible morning, Mayor Williamson announced. Sheriff Bradley made his way slowly to the podium, the room falling completely silent as he began to speak. 3 weeks ago, I thought my career in law enforcement might be ending in the worst possible way, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the quiet room. I was lost, injured, and running out of hope. But then a miracle happened in the form of a German Shepherd named Rex and 2 brave 12-year-old girls. The sheriff went on to describe his experience from his perspective, explaining how he had heard Rex barking in the distance and known that rescue was coming. That dog didn't just find me by accident, he said. He was actively searching for me, and he led Emma and Sarah directly to where I lay hidden behind that fallen log. The audience listened in rapt attention as Sheriff Bradley continued. In my 23 years of police work, I've worked with many trained police dogs, but what Rex did that day was beyond anything I've ever witnessed from even the most highly trained animals. His instincts and determination saved my life. When Sheriff Bradley finished speaking, Mayor Williamson called the Martinez family to join her at the front of the room. Rex walked calmly beside the twins, his tail wagging as the crowd applauded. Emma and Sarah Martinez, the mayor began, your courage and quick thinking in an emergency situation exemplify the very best of our community spirit. You could have easily ignored Rex's unusual behavior that morning, but instead, you trusted your instincts and followed where he led. The mayor presented each girl with a beautiful plaque recognizing their heroism, along with a savings bond from the town to help with their future education. But the moment everyone had been waiting for came, when Mayor Williamson knelt down beside Rex. Her hands was an ornate golden key attached to a blue ribbon. Rex Martinez, she said solemnly, as if the dog could understand every word. By the power vested in me by the town of Millbrook, I hereby present you with the key to our city, making you an honorary citizen and recognizing your extraordinary service to our community. The mayor gently placed the ribbon around Rex's neck, so the golden key rested beside his official collar. Rex sat perfectly still during the ceremony, as if he understood the importance of the moment. The crowd erupted in applause, and many people were wiping tears from their eyes. Rex looked around the room with what seemed like pride, his tail wagging enthusiastically. But that's not all. Mayor Williamson continued as the applause died down. The town council has also voted to establish the Rex Martinez Memorial Fund, which will provide training and equipment for search and rescue dogs throughout our county. Sheriff Bradley returned to the podium to make one final announcement. I'm also pleased to tell you that Rex has been accepted into the state search and rescue training program. Starting next month, he'll begin professional training that will allow him to assist in emergency situations throughout our region. Emma and Sarah looked at each other with excitement. Rex would get to help save more people, just as he had saved Sheriff Bradley. As the ceremony concluded and people began to mingle, Rex became the center of attention. Children gathered around to pet him, and adults wanted to take pictures with the hero dog. Through it all, Rex remained calm and friendly, seeming to enjoy the attention while staying close to his family. Dr. Williams, the veterinarian who had called after seeing the news story, approached the Martinez family. "I've been watching Rex tonight," she said, "and I have to say his temperament is perfect for search and rescue work. He's alert and focused, but gentle and calm around people. Those are exactly the qualities needed for this type of work." An elderly woman named Mrs. Henderson, who had lived in Millbrook her entire 87 years, made her way over to the family with tears in her eyes. "In all my years in this town," she said, "I've never seen anything that brought the community together like this story has. That dog of yours is special, and so are you girls." As the evening wound down and people began to head home, the Martinez family stood together outside the community center. Rex sat beside them, his golden key and official collar gleaming under the streetlights. "I'm so proud of all of you," Maria Martinez said, putting her arms around her daughters. "You've shown that age doesn't matter when it comes to doing the right thing." 6 months later, Rex had completed his search and rescue training with flying colors. He now worked alongside professional emergency response teams throughout the county, and his natural abilities had only improved with formal training. The Martinez family was contacted regularly for Rex's assistance in finding missing hikers, lost children, and even helping locate evidence at crime scenes. Emma and Sarah, now 13, had become local celebrities in their own right. They received letters from children all over the state who had heard their story, and they often visited schools to talk about the importance of trusting your instincts and helping others in need. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came on a crisp autumn morning when Sheriff Bradley, now fully recovered and back on active duty, arrived at the Martinez house with a special visitor. "Girls, I'd like you to meet someone very important," Sheriff Bradley said as he walked up to their front door, accompanied by a distinguished-looking woman in a state police uniform. The woman introduced herself as Captain Jennifer Morrison from the State Emergency Response Division. "I've heard a lot about you three," she said, looking down at Rex, who had bounded over to greet the visitors. "Rex has been involved in 14 successful search and rescue operations since completing his training," Captain Morrison continued. "His success rate is unprecedented. But more than that, his story has inspired communities across the state to invest in search and rescue programs." Captain Morrison explained that she had come to personally thank the family and to share some remarkable news. Because of the publicity surrounding Rex's story and his subsequent success as a search and rescue dog, our state has seen a 40% increase in funding for emergency response programs. Rex hasn't just saved Sheriff Bradley's life, he's helped save dozens of other lives through the programs his story inspired. The twins listened in amazement as Captain Morrison described how Rex's story had been featured in national magazines and had even caught the attention of search and rescue organizations in other countries. "There's something else," Sheriff Bradley added with a smile. "Next month, Rex is going to receive the State Medal of Honor for Animal Heroism. It's the highest award our state gives to animals who have served their communities with distinction." Rex, now wearing a professional search and rescue vest along with his ceremonial key to the city, seemed to understand that good things were being said about him. His tail wagged constantly as the adults talked, and he kept looking up at Emma and Sarah as if to make sure they were proud of him. That evening, the Martinez family sat together on their back porch watching Rex play in the yard. The simple leather collar he had worn as a puppy had been replaced by his official search and rescue gear. But he was still the same loyal, loving dog they had always known. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't followed Rex that morning?" Sarah asked, watching their dog chase a butterfly across the grass. Emma thought about it for a moment. "I try not to think about that," she said, "but it makes me realize how important it is to pay attention to the people and animals around us. They might be trying to tell us something important." Their father, Carlos, nodded in agreement. Rex taught us all a valuable lesson that day. Sometimes the most important discoveries come from following our instincts, even when we don't fully understand where they're leading us. Over the years that followed, Rex continued his search and rescue work, helping to find dozens of missing people and becoming a legend in emergency response circles. Emma and Sarah grew up knowing they had played a part in saving not just Sheriff Bradley's life, but potentially many other lives through the programs and awareness their story had generated. The twins often returned to the forest where they had found Sheriff Bradley, now accompanied by Rex in his professional capacity as he trained new search and rescue dogs. The fallen log was still there, and the area had been marked with a small plaque commemorating the rescue. Sheriff Bradley, who became a lifelong friend of the Martinez family, often said that the rescue had taught him never to underestimate the power of young people to make a difference in the world. Emma and Sarah proved that heroes come in all ages, he would tell people. And Rex proved that sometimes the most important members of our community walk on 4 legs instead of 2. As Rex grew older, he eventually retired from active search and rescue duty, but he never lost his protective instincts or his uncanny ability to sense when someone needed help. He spent his golden years as a beloved family pet, visiting schools with Emma and Sarah to teach children about courage, kindness, and the special bond between humans and animals. The story of Rex and the Martinez twins became part of Millbrook's local history, told and retold to new generations as an example of how ordinary people and extraordinary dogs can change lives simply by caring enough to help when help is needed most. Years later, when people asked Emma and Sarah what they had learned from their experience, they always gave the same answer. We learned that heroes aren't always the people you expect them to be. Sometimes they're just ordinary kids who listen to their dog and do what needs to be done. And Rex, even in his retirement, would wag his tail and look proud whenever he heard his story being told, as if he knew that his moment of instinct in the forest that morning had started something much bigger than any of them could have imagined.